So Sony recently announced the RX1R Mark III, which is a point-and-shoot camera that is going to sell for over $5,000. Now, of course, that caused a big stir online, and you have people who are absolutely hating the camera and trashing Sony for it, and you have people who are praising the camera and being called fanboys. As with all things on social media, the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, and we're going to try to have a logical conversation about this new announcement. So if you don't know anything about the RX1 line, it is a high-end point-and-shoot camera that has a fixed lens, and the last version came out about 10 years ago. One of the biggest selling points for the RX1 line is how small the cameras are. Like, you know, you have the A7 IV, and then you have the A7C II, which is like a smaller version of A7 IV. Well, this is like a lot smaller, like much smaller. Matter of fact, the RX1R Mark III is lighter than the A7C II without a lens on it. To put in perspective how popular the RX1 line has been, even if you try to find a used RX1R Mark II, they still go for over $2,000 used, and that's a 10-year-old camera with completely outdated everything. Now, I don't think it's the camera itself that everyone has a problem with. I think it's more so the price tag of $5,000. So let's try to dive into that and see if that makes any sense. Usually the first thing that happens when people talk about how expensive something is they give examples of all the things they could buy instead. So you're probably gonna have people talking about they can buy an A7C-R with the lens and still come out, you know, around $3,000. And that saves them $2,000, which is true. Some people are gonna talk about, you know, being able to buy a Leica Q3 for just a little bit more money, and they're gonna have a Leica. But realistically, in the camera world, there's never an apples to apples comparison, and the same goes with this situation. So while you can get an A7C-R and have the same 61 megapixel image and, you know, a small body, it is nowhere near as small as RX1. It's just that we're in a totally different realm of size here. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you know, I'm not going to spend all that extra money just to get a smaller camera with less features. So why wouldn't I just buy the A7CR? And I think what we need to start doing is realizing that you can buy an A7CR. It's there. It exists for the exact reason. Well, I would just spend a little more money and buy a Leica Q3. That's also there. You can spend a little more money and buy a Leica Q3. All this means is that this is not a product that is made for you. There are other options out there for you to get, for you to be interested in. That's why we have options. But I'm also not gonna sit here and act like nothing is ever overpriced, because, you know, things get a little ridiculous, and $5,000 is a lot of money. And, you know, I've spent more than $5,000 on the camera before, but I wouldn't spend $5,000 on this particular camera. But it's not for me to do because I'm not the person that this camera is designed for. I think it's very intriguing and I love how small it is, but I don't care that much. So if we put ourselves in the mindset of somebody who is interested in a small camera, they usually want the camera to be very small so that they can use it more. I don't know if you've ever had a big camera and you go out and you're trying to decide whether or not you're going to take the camera with you, and you think about all the hassle that comes with bringing the camera. It's like, do I need to put it on the camera strap? Where am I going to put the camera when I'm not using the camera? Can I hide the camera? Can I leave it in the car and it's not obvious? It's like, what, like, there's so many little things that goes into, you know, bringing the camera around with you every day. And some people want to bring a camera with them every day, and the bigger the camera is, the less likely they're going to shoot with it. So although someone might save a couple of $1,000s by getting a camera that's not as small, that camera is more likely to sit on the shelf. Like right now, I have a medium format film camera up there that I absolutely love, but it's a tank. This camera is giant and I love it, but I'm not bringing this everywhere. I'm just not. It don't make sense. So although the value is there and although I love it, realistically, I'm not going to use it as much as something that makes more sense for me to bring around. And people are willing to pay for that. I think the closest thing to it is probably the Leica Q3, just because it's a little bit more money. It's also full frame. It has a similar focal length. It's, you know, it's the similar kind of argument is being made for the Leica Q3 and the RX1R Mark III. And I think a lot of people are going to say, why would I buy a Sony when I can buy a Leica? Well, there are also people who say, why would I buy a Leica? Because I can buy the Sony. So, you know, Leica obviously has the prestige, but I think realistically speaking, you know, there's a lot of people who really don't care. Like, we don't care if it's a Leica or a Fuji or a Sony or Lumix or whatever. We just want the camera to do what we want it to do. But if you like the Leica brand and all the things that come with Leica, then, you know, you can go buy a Leica. So if we look at the situation, I don't think there's another camera on the market that is full frame, has around 61 megapixels, that is that small, and has all the modern features, like, you know, is obviously going to have the best autofocusing abilities in that whole realm. This kind of reminds me of when I first got the Ronin 4D and everyone was talking about how expensive it was. And I always made the argument, like, this camera is literally the absolute cheapest camera you can possibly buy that does what it does. There's no other setup in the industry that does what the Ronin 4D does for that price. You're going to spend more money every single time trying to do what that camera does at this price range. It's just not happening. So, although it is expensive, relatively speaking, there is nothing that you can do to get what you get from that camera. So, with the RX1R Mark III, there's no camera on the market that is full frame, that is that size, that has all the modern features, you know, from AI autofocusing and all of that. There's no other camera on the market that has that. So if that's the type of camera that you're looking for, then this is heaven sent. But if that's not the boxes you need checked, then you're gonna say it's overpriced, which, you know, it makes sense. Everyone has a different perspective that they're looking for. Like, how much could I sell a bottle of water to a fish in the ocean? There's no value there. So, you know, if that same fish was in the middle of the desert, then it'd be a whole lot of value there. So it all depends on what angle you're coming from and what is important to you. The RX1R Mark III has a leaf shutter. And if you don't know what a leaf shutter is or how it works or what advantages a leaf shutter has over a normal shutter, then, you know, that's probably a sign that there's something about this camera that you don't understand or you don't need or you don't want, that there's a whole segment of people who desperately desire that. Now, does this camera have its shortcomings? Absolutely. I think the EVF could have been better. When you look at all the other options in that realm, they have really nice EVFs. I think that it having a fixed screen on the back is definitely a miss, because no screen movement at all is pretty extreme. You know, I don't need a whole flip out selfie screen, but at least be able to tilt the screen up and down when you're taking pictures. I definitely don't like the battery choice. It's the old batteries from like the A6000 series. Like, those batteries were trash, like horrible. But on the flip side, if you have an RX1R Mark II, the battery for that is even worse. So if you're coming from that camera and you're moving to this one, then that's an improvement. But I think for most of us who have used those old Sony batteries, we're like, no. I'm not doing that again. I'm not going back there. But it's a matter of perspective. If you're coming from one way, it's stupid. If you're coming from the other way, it's an improvement. Now, I do think that this might open the door for them to make an RX1 camera that's not a R line. You know, R is for the resolution, which is why it has 61 megapixels. But imagine if they gave us a RX1 that had the A7 IV sensor in it, or the A7 V sensor in it that's coming. You know, so I think, you know, that would obviously bring the price down, and you still have that really small compact body that a lot of people desire. And, you know, I think that's a win. I think that would be, you know, priced far more affordable. You know, that wouldn't be a $5,000 camera. That would probably be a $3,000 camera or $2,700 camera that I think a lot more people would bite on. Size definitely does matter with how usable something is. Pause. I would just really like us as a community to get to the point where, you know, when something comes out, we don't have these whole civil wars and people like actually getting angry and mad about a piece of technology coming out, when we have more options than we ever had. Things are cheaper than they've ever been. These things are more accessible than they've ever been. Like, there's never been a time in mankind's history where it was easier, faster, cheaper, and more reliable to take photos and videos. Like, we have it made, and we're literally angry at each other for liking something or not liking something. It's like we all have our own personal individual things that we love and we care about, that, you know, there's no way a camera company or any company could completely dedicate all their efforts into making the perfect thing for every single person. Like, it's not going to happen. So if you're somebody who doesn't care about the size of the camera, then it doesn't matter what anybody come out with that's a really small camera, because it's not important to you. Some people want the biggest, chunkiest camera they can find because they have very large hands, and anything that is small feels like a toy to them, and they won't use the camera.
How many X-Hops can fit in Kofi's hand?
Three Fuji X-Hops.
So, you know, we all have different needs, and I think if we just look at the product for what it's for, right, and then try to make apples to apples comparison. Obviously, if Sony came out with a direct competitor to a Leica Q3, and it's like, okay, these cameras are, you know, direct competitors to each other. They're evenly matched. They have, you know, same build quality. They have the same feature set. They have the same this, that, and the other. It's like, okay, if you're charging me $6,000 for it and the other company is charging me $10,000 for it, then it's like, okay, I can actually say that's overpriced, because I'm getting the same thing, not something similar, not something that's good enough for me, not something that is, you know, 90% there. It's like, no. So what was Sony thinking? Sony was thinking about that group of people who want an RX1R Mark III that don't mind spending $5,000. They now have a camera. Congratulations to those people. Shout out to them. Am I one of those people? No. Are you one of those people? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you guys in the next one.